Thank you very much. Yes, well, here it is, the Skeleton Coast. I was so excited. This is 1995, and I thought, what a wonderful sounding place, Skeleton Coast. It runs up the southwest of Africa, along the length of Namibia, and as Alistair said, no one had been allowed to walk the full length, and that was partly because of the ecology, which was very delicate, and partly because, well, the previous people had had a bit of a trouble. You see, it's actually a joke. This wasn't the previous traveller. But there are a lot of skeletons out there. A lot of it's to do with insurance, I discovered. People would wreck their boats on the shore. But there were a lot of people who also died out there, and that was because of the great gold rush of the 1920s and 30s. So a very exciting place, but full of hazards, and the government said, essentially, no, you cannot walk up here. Just to give you a bit of an idea, there's the southern edge of Namibia. I'd walk the full length up towards the north, which is Angola, through the Naukluft area, which involves the Sperrgebiet, which is the forbidden zone. So that's very, very much off limit, 180 kilometers fenced off. And then right up in the north, the Sikus van der Dood, which means the coast of the dead. So I thought that'd be exciting, a climax to my journey, if I got permission. So this is me on the recce, and I thought the one way I might do it is to do without the camera crew, but offer to do a TV series for the BBC, and that might help the tourist industry. But how was I going to do it in this delicate environment? The answer was camels, I thought to myself. But the camels wouldn't particularly like this environment. This is the Langevant, which means the long wall. I think it's 70 kilometers of solid sand dunes. Look at the height of those dunes. I mean, that's 300 meters, 400 meters, slap up against the coast. How are my camels ever going to cope with this? There aren't many camels in Namibia, but I thought, Nelson, I didn't know him then, but he was about to know me. I found this camel in Namibia, great big camel, and I thought, this is the camel for my expedition. He won't be scared of anything. But the thing about camels is they don't really need people. That's the trouble. I mean, if you're alone in the desert, they've got all their physical attributes. They've got their humps and their flashy special noses and things. And yeah, that's the trouble. Nelson wouldn't come with me unless I took his companions. And here they are. There's Nelson at the end. He was the big, tough camel. There's his devoted little friend, Andris, and then Jan at the end. They had a sort of slavish devotion to Nelson, which was quite nauseating, really. But I realized I had to get them somehow on my side. And this is me having imported them to the Skeleton Coast. There's the Skeleton Coast. The government had obviously said yes by this stage. We'll let him do it. But they had never seen the sea before. And I realized I was going to be in rather a lot of trouble because Nelson had never really traveled very much. He was a very sheltered camel. And this journey was his worst nightmare. He didn't want to do it. And the only way I got him along this terrifying section of the Langevant, where the sand dunes meet the sea, was with the help of the government employees who are stopping us smuggling diamonds. This is the diamond south of Namibia, and a man was following us and watching us all the way, and actually, in fact, frisked Nelson at the end of the journey. To make sure he hadn't got diamonds in his ears. But you can see that this is some of the diamond era from the 1930s. People had gone in there with the help of oxes, and these are the ox carts, and very much sort of adding to the atmosphere of a sort of deserted place. And unfortunately, the oxes, when they arrived, got eaten. So it's a sort of one-way trip for the gold miners, or the diamond miners, rather. And very, very spooky. You get on seeing Nelson looking at the ox horns that still stuck out of the sand, thinking, oh no, is there a camel skeleton here? And there were indeed skeletons of camels here because the Germans brought them in at this period to try and help keep themselves alive out there in the desert. And you can see what happened at the end of that gold rush, or I keep saying gold rush, diamond rush, was that the price of diamonds collapsed in the Depression, and the workers, the diamond diggers, forgot about trying to hunt for their fortune and left their shovels in the sand and walked out, or died, I don't know which. But anyway, this was the halfway point of the journey, and the point when I didn't have anyone accompanying me. So the last 6 weeks of the journey I was going to be totally alone, and Nelson decided it was time to go home. And as I said, camels don't need humans. If you're alone with them, you can't really stop them going home. And I had to go in and out of every single sand dune because Nelson had never seen sand dunes before. He was horrified by them. And so I had to avoid the sand dunes. And then I had to avoid women. I discovered Nelson had never seen a woman before. But I did say he was a very sheltered camel. It was true. There's a lovely Himba woman who'd helped train me for this expedition, sort of toughened me up, got me used to the environment. And Nelson here is trying to devour her. So you can see my hand desperately trying to hold on to Nelson to keep him down. And then Nelson came across giraffes. He'd never seen a giraffe before and was absolutely horrified. The first animal bigger than himself. And I have to say, this was a weirdo giraffe. I don't know how to say this politely, but it decided it wanted to have its wicked way with him. And that's what it... I was going to say that's what it did. It didn't quite. But it did stalk us day and night, this giraffe. Giraffes are very curious animals, and clearly it thought this was another giraffe. But Nelson wasn't going to have anything to do with it, and he kept on dragging me away from this giraffe. But anyway, time went by, and gradually we did settle into this environment, and each one of these crises, as they were for Nelson, the women, the sea, and so on, the camels, began to sort of help build our relationship. And this is right towards the end of the journey. Andrus, the youngest camel's terrified. He's trying to walk back home. He's walked 1,000 miles with me. Now he's in the bleak Sikus van der Dood, the land of the dead. And he's just wanting to walk off back home again. And I kept on saying, no, you've almost done it. But of course, we hadn't quite done it. Right at the end of Namibia is this vast sand dune sea. There's the Kunene coming down. Here's Angola on the left-hand side. We had to cross through this. And I wasn't sure at this stage if anyone had ever crossed the Namib right up in the north, certainly alone. I had no map that guided me through here, and it was absolutely terrifying, but the camels worked with me, and it's so exciting. After spending 3.5 months with them, they did walk down through some of the highest sand dunes in the world. Nelson wasn't a great fan yet of sand dunes, but you can see he is coming down. He's coming down last from the... it's a sort of controlled descent. But we had found a home in this environment, and incredibly exciting to get to the end of the journey, reach the Kunene. I just wanted to end with the words I used right at the end of this journey on the TV program I made, which was... I said no one had walked up this skeleton coast before, but really that's not the right sentiment, is it? I mean, doing first is not what exploration really should be about. It's often seen to be about that. But exploration, as opposed to adventure, is about discovery, and that's scientific discovery, but also personal discovery. And that means not going somewhere in order to make your mark, planting a flag. It's about the opposite of that. It's about opening yourself up, making yourself vulnerable, and allowing the place to make its mark on you. Thank you.